Like a top 10 first round draft pick, the Leica Q3 was supposed to be this lock-in for my camera kit. But after spending several months in both personal and professional shooting environments, it turns out this camera was missing the one thing that I needed in my team of cameras: chemistry. And look, that's not because there's anything inherently wrong with this thing. I mean, we are talking about a premium point-and-shoot camera that's handmade in Europe and pretty much sold out in every major market. That doesn't happen with problematic tools. If there's something wrong with this camera, it's usually the YouTuber behind it. Was that a shot? I don't know, it kind of felt like a shot. More than anything, the Leica Q3 made me appreciate how differentiated the lineup is for Leica, and more specifically, how that Venn diagram between M and Q users, well, it might have less overlap than I originally thought. What I'm about to say might sound like I'm knocking the Leica Q3, and that's probably because there's been so much lazy dialogue around this series of camera. People start to make these false equivalencies that buying this thing is like getting a Summilux lens and a camera for free. This is horseshit. Believing something like this discredits all the hard work and innovations that is required to produce a Leica Q3 and Summilux lens respectively. Instead, the Leica Q3 is an answer to the question, what would a full-frame point-and-shoot Leica camera feel like? To answer this question, Leica has to find out what kind of customer would appreciate a product like this and what features would they care about most. Next, they'd have to find out what is that price point that could support the materials, the processing, the manufacturing, the marketing of the product line itself. Next, you'd have to, well, this is the hard part, you would have to find that middle ground between the imagination of photographers and the realities of supply chain management. It's all this work and more that gives us the Leica Q3, an all-inclusive, feature-rich camera for photographers that want the Leica experience in a travel-friendly package for the price of a modern Summicron lens. That's the pitch. All right, let's take a minute for the sponsor of this channel, and that is Capture One Pro. They've been partners for years now, and I went to them. I said, give me the best damn offer I can offer to my audience. Give me something amazing. And they've come to the table with something pretty impressive. Starting today, all the way through November 27th, you can save 50% off for both new and existing customers on Capture One Pro. This is the best offer they've ever delivered on this channel. Here's an additional bonus. If you decide, whether you're a new customer or an existing customer, to get Capture One Pro, use my code and you will receive their Beyond Film Style Pack. This usually costs some dollars, but for you, if you upgrade right now, or whether you start your journey with Capture One Pro right now, you're gonna get this style pack that they've created absolutely free. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know how much I've been using and relying on Capture One Pro for the work that I'm doing, and my thanks to them for being an incredible partner. If you've ever been curious, this is the best time to try Capture One Pro, and I'll leave a link to a playlist with all my tutorials that will get you up and running much faster. Now, let's get back to this review. The Leica Q3's full-frame 60 megapixel sensor is not the exact same one you'd find on the Leica M11. It has slightly less dynamic range, and you could probably guess that given that the base ISO starts at ISO 100 and not 64. That being said, this camera, it still gives you plenty of information for you to use in the field. Whether it's a bright day or a cloudy day, you will capture a good amount of information to work with to craft your story. What made this camera really shine for me was the ability to just use it with one hand in event, concert, or even backstage environments. I could throw this thing wide open, half press, recompose, grab the shot, and capture something that feels at home in a magazine. Or more relatably, I could be wrestling my toddler in one arm as he's trying to pry my face from my skull while capturing a photo of my older son practicing his kata. It just worked. The image pipeline that Leica provides is something that I've come to love. It's a little bit more neutral than what most manufacturers are providing. But let's just say that you want to go in and customize your JPEG profile a little bit, you can go ahead and do that. And what this camera introduces, and I hope that more manufacturers start to do this, is the ability to connect to the Leica Photos app and download new JPEG profiles. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Leica has the best photography companion app bar none. You can go in, connect reliably, and with the Q3 and their advanced Wi-Fi chip, photos just transfer so much faster. You can even transfer video files as well. And what takes this even further is that ability to download new looks for your JPEG files. I hope that they expand on this in the future, and we'll probably see more Leica cameras that have the Maestro 4 chip supporting this feature, but it's just something cool to have. It introduces more functionality to your tool and a better way, I shouldn't say a better way, an alternative way to tell a great story in the moment. Going back to the shooting experience, the Q3 makes it incredibly easy to create and share great images in the moment. And this is largely thanks to the upgraded autofocus system. Though not perfect, is still lightning fast at acquiring focus to capture an image. Whether it was Andrew Schultz or a coil array, I was able to just capture a great shot with minimal shutter lag and tell a story in the field. The back LCD, as you may have seen in other videos, doesn't sit flush with the camera, and this is a design decision that I don't necessarily agree with. I wish that you could still have that tilting display and would sit flush with the camera, but if the choice is a flat LCD that sits right up against the camera or a flip out display, I will flip that all day like it's breakfast at Denny's. The fact of the matter is that when you start using this camera in the field, you forget about this minor design change and you just capture images at different angles. I reached out to my friend Sire in New York, and we were capturing and documenting these classical dancers from France, and even in a tight environment, you can get very creative with this thing. It just makes it easy to capture unique angles. I also have to give a major shout out to Sire, so be sure to follow him. There's a ton of images in this review that are from him as well. I had a major trip cancellation at the time I was trying to produce this review, and he came through clutch and was able to support with imagery and insights from his experience using the Q3. Before I go on to the video features of this camera, which are worth talking about, let's also mention that leaf shutter, because this thing is incredible. This allows you to shoot at much higher flash sync speeds. And while I didn't get that much time on this specific camera, this is a feature that has proven to be valuable in studio environments, just to be able to crank up the shutter speed that you're working with your subject and have that full power of your off-camera flash. It's something that if you invest in a Leica Q2 or 3 that you really should explore and can bring new dimension to the images that you're capturing. Now, let's talk about these video features. Like I mentioned in my first impressions, the camera can capture up to 8K 30p in 420 or 4K 60p in 422. I found that the latter was a bit more useful with this specific camera, where you're just having a bit more color information. And well, let me just put it this way. I don't think the Leica Q3 is a video camera per se. I think it's a complement to video workflows. Because of its size, you can just throw it in interesting places and interesting angles to capture very unique shots. It's very liberating. And because of things like L-Log, you can actually get footage, if exposed correctly, that has so much range to it and can grade very nicely that you can match it with even cinema solutions. It's also something that's less intimidating if you want to try and capture some of these moving portraits in the field. And though the Q3 doesn't have all the advanced cinema options that the Leica SL2S has, it still has enough. It has enough to keep you engaged. And like I mentioned before, L-Log, which is getting more support from third-party software, and I've spoken at length about L-Log in my Leica SL2S review, this is something that will, with time, bring more value to the work that you're doing, even if it is just for yourself. Now, even with all of this camera, the Q3, it didn't speak to me in a way where I felt like it needed to be a part of my kit. So I decided to go out and find some Leica Q users and find out from them, what is it about this platform, this product, that makes it a necessity for the work that they're doing?
The best thing about the Leica experience is that it doesn't come in the way. After the initial week or 2 weeks of getting used to the system, it just fades out. So now I've gotten the camera configured to a point where I don't really need to go into the menus or anything past the first menu page to change whatever I need to change. And that lets me focus on what I want to do. And ideally, that is what you want a camera system to do, which is get out of the way. So it's been great with that, yeah. And also, I think with the Q, I have gotten the feel of how good manual focusing can be, which is not what you get with modern mirrorless cameras with their wire focus. And even though the Q3 does have wire focus, but it's implemented in such a way that really feels like an actual focus. So that has been fantastic.
As you know, I run a photography tour company in India, and I see people from all over the world, all age range. And what I noticed while I'm working with them is they carry their big camera systems, they carry their big bodies and big lenses, and I see it all the time. Those systems holding them back, limiting their creativity, and just like they can't be themselves just because of that. And I always tell them that if you have, and the funny part is I'm working with a Q, and they see me using this and they'll be like, wow, you packed so light, you just have one camera and you're getting more shots than I'm doing. I'm like, because I'm free, because I'm like not thinking about anything else. I'm not thinking about weight, I'm not thinking of like, it's not slowing me down, I'm shooting whatever I'm looking at. So yeah, I think it's a camera for everybody.
Now, these are all great things about the Leica Q3. Let's move on to some things that this camera can do better. The autofocus of this camera can be fantastic or frustrating depending on how you use autofocus. And this is probably why there's so much conflicting dialogue around the Leica Q3 and autofocus. Like me, if you are using single point or zone, this camera works incredibly well. You point it and it will acquire focus very quickly and allow you to take the picture with an incredibly high degree of accuracy. When I am using this in single point, again, I'm pointing to where I want to take that focus point and then recomposing and then taking the shot. And it works incredibly well. If you are switching to eye, face, head detection, this is where challenges will arise. In its current firmware, this camera is very hesitant. It will quickly stutter between eye, face, head, body, what have you. It'll just keep stuttering between that and doesn't exactly exude confidence. And this starts to, exaggerate as you lose light in the environment. Now, if you bring in more subjects into the scene, it gets even more complex. It makes it very difficult to use. I would use this to test it out, but it would be hit or miss on whether or not the subject that I wanted in focus was actually in focus. Now, if I was gonna put money on this, I would say that Leica is fully aware of this and they are working on improving this and planning to release several updates to address this. In its current form though, I think the autofocus is best used in single or zone focusing, and that the eye, face, and head detection is probably not what you want to rely on for the work that you're capturing. While it might not be the target customer, I would still love to see the cine mode from the Leica SL2S make its way to the Leica Q3. It just makes video capture a lot more easier, especially when you take into things like shutter angle and ASA. It just speaks that cinema language a bit better. And I think it would empower users to use this as a video tool more often than not. While we're on that subject, I would also love to see a way to get video out with the user interface, so you can actually see the settings and menus should you use this camera with an external monitor. Now, if we're talking about a future version of the Leica Q3, another version, I would love to see an integrated flash. I would love to see that LCD sit flush with the back of the camera, and I would love to see an internal ND. These are all three things that could come together to really improve the user experience and allow people to capture in more environments and tell different kinds of stories. It's not cheap, it's not easy, but hey, I would love to see these things in the next version. There's also a lot of talk about how the Leica Q3 lens isn't a true 28mm perspective. A ton of people have talked about this, but most of the conversation is speculative. I did some tests and also found that the 28mm here doesn't look like my Summicron 28mm. So I went to my friends at Leica to find out why. And it turns out the answer is just a simple explanation of physics and economics. The new Summicron 28mm f2.0 is about $5,300 and the Leica Q3 nears $6,000. The glass of these two are much closer in quality than comparing the Leica Q3 to a 28mm Summilux lens, which retails for about $7,800. So you gotta ask yourself, on one side you have just a lens, on the other side you have a lens and a camera. How do you rationalize these numbers? You can't just assume that $700 delta in price is the price of a sensor, body, LCD, and all that stuff. The Leica Q3 has an f1.7 aperture, a leaf shutter, a macro mode, and you gotta think, it can't have all of this and a camera body and still hit that target price. And so what you see here is that the Q lens has focus breathing. The closer your subject is to the camera, the slightly wider your perspective will be. When you focus to infinity, you will see this camera get closer to that advertised 28mm perspective. Is this a major issue? Is this a breaking point? Is this a controversy? I genuinely don't think so. I think it might deter a tiny group of people, but for the most part, I do not think the target customer cares about this delta between what this camera sees and what an actual 28 is. The reason I bring this up is because I find it interesting. I find it interesting how companies decide how to produce a certain product to deliver an experience. And in this case, the decision was made not to include that double focusing mechanism you'd find in a Summicron lens to mitigate focus breathing. That if they were to do that, it would jump up the cost, the complexity, and price out a good amount of customers, and potentially even making this something a bit more challenging to deliver to the market. Anyway, thank you for indulging that little nerdy tangent. Let's go back and talk about who would get the most value from a camera like this. Like I mentioned before, the Leica Q3 is an all-inclusive, feature-rich camera for photographers that want the Leica experience in a travel-friendly package for about the price of a modern Summicron lens. There are those that will prioritize the pound-for-pound value of this sensor, lens, color profile over some of the competitors in the market. And look, an expert with an alternative camera, they will always produce a better result than a novice in a Leica Q3, but all things remaining equal, this sensor, this lens, you're just going to get a better result in the moment than most other APS-C point-and-shoot solutions in the market. The real question is whether that difference in result is worth it for the work that we're going to do. And just to accept that just because we can't afford it, that difference doesn't exist. For those that want an easy, all-in-one solution that can capture great results and share it really quickly and easily in the field, the Leica Q3 really sits at the top of the short list. Another group, and there might be some overlap here, are the group of people that put a high amount of value in how a camera looks and feels. The Leica Q3 is effortlessly cool and easy on the eyes. It encourages you to pick it up and use it. From the design of its physical attributes to the digital experience with the Photos app, it makes for something that feels premium, and guess what? There is a ton of people out there willing to pay for that experience. If you're the kind of person that is not gonna blink at a $6,000 point-and-shoot camera and you just want something that looks and feels great in the field, again, there aren't many options on the market that compare with something like this. It might just be the previous version. With all that said though, this is something I try to make an effort in mentioning to anyone that reaches out. Try to go hands-on with the camera. Go to a Leica store or an authorized dealer, put the camera in your hands and try it out and see how it feels, and try to answer the question, how will a camera like this improve or change or add value to your creative journey? Like a great sequel, the Leica Q3 moves the story forward, reaches new heights, and inspires its audience. But as with many trilogies, it also caters to a specific base. The Leica Q3 isn't for everyone, and it doesn't try to be. For me specifically, I never got to the point where I feel like I would pick this up over my M camera because it made the act of photography too easy. It started to pull away from the things that have made me fall in love with photography all over again when I moved to Leica in the first place. This intensely manual journey of creating an image. And while the Q3 came in clutch where I could use it with one hand reliably to capture these great moments, these real candid moments of humanity, it didn't tip the scales enough where I felt like I would pick this over another M. I own and operate a lot of cameras because my team and I are shooting all kinds of projects all over the world. But when it comes to photography, I only have 4 spots available: street, studio, and a backup for each one. And with where my work is taking me right now, I just can't see the Leica Q3 taking one of those spots. That being said, this camera continues to be hard to find as it sells out as quickly as it arrives in stores. And that's because it appeals to many more photographers than people just like me. And to those of you that are lucky enough to get one, congratulations. Get out there and put some reps on that thing. So there you have it. That is my review of the Leica Q3. It took some time, and that's because I really wanted to dive in and answer some of my own personal questions with this camera. And I think that is what makes a lot of my reviews enjoyable for so many of you watching, is because there is that either shared experience or divergent experience. And talking about these things out loud, I think, helps people make a more informed buying decision. But again, like I mentioned earlier, try the damn thing out. Go and get your hands on one of them where you can and see how it feels and see if it really speaks to you. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough for one video. I will say, as always, if you love photography and you want to see more of my photography adventures, you want to hear more about that, visit my photo club. The link is in the description. And yeah, that's enough. That's enough for one video. As always, my name's Gajan. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.